name is Michael Blain, and I was born in Czechoslovakia. Maybe we should give the date, today's date, which is what month? August 2nd, 1986. Took me a while to figure that out. Huh? I was born in what was then Czechoslovakia. This a little geography lesson. This is Czechoslovakia. Right here, Czechoslovakia had 4 provinces, Bohemia, Moravia, and Slovakia, and a 4th one called Carpathia. And this is where I was born. My village where I was born was called Selce, or Selce. It's not even on the map. It's so small that very few maps had it on. But there's a town here showing Mukachevo, or Munkac, which was 34 kilometers, about 25 miles from our village. Carpathia was part of Czechoslovakia from 1918 to 1939. In 1939, the Hungarians took it over when the rest of Czechoslovakia became part of the Nazis took it over. Hungary got part of Slovakia and Carpathia, and the Hungarian held on to it until 1945. And in 1945, it became part of the Soviet Union. And here's a map of the Soviet Union. Look how big it is. This is the Soviet Union, and Carpathia is a very, very small part of that area, if I can find it. I had it before. Disappeared. Okay, Moscow. Here is it. This little corner is Carpathia, and it became part of the Ukrainian Republic and part of the whole Soviet Union. So it practically disappeared. In Hungarian, the village was called Bereg Kisfalut, and Bereg is the name of the county, and Kisfalut translates little village, and that's what it was. There were several hundred families living in that village, and of them approximately 50 families were Jewish. I can still go down in my memory from one end of the village to the other and name the families. Today there is one Jewish man living there who's married to a non-Jew, and his sister who converted and is also married to a non-Jew. And that's the extent of Jewish population out of 50 families, numbering perhaps 300 souls. I attended Czech school until I was 11 years old, until 1939.
In the town?
In the village, yes. It was a mixture of population. The local population were called Ruthenians, and they spoke they call it a Ruthenian language. It's very close to Ukrainian language, but a little different. And at home we spoke only Yiddish, and I attended Czech school. So as little kids, most of us learned to speak 3 or 4 languages. Yiddish at home, with our non-Jewish friends, Ruthenian, and in school it was Czech. In addition to that, our parents spoke Hungarian, so we would not understand what they were talking about, so we had to learn a 4th language, which came in handy in 1939 when the Hungarians invaded and took over Carpathia. In 1939, for a while, Hitler flirted with the Ukrainian Nazis, so a group of Nazis came in from the Ukraine, and they practically took over the area, and they stopped teaching Czech. The Czech teachers were expelled, the schools were closed down, so we attended for a while Ukrainian school. And then for the next, then when the Hungarians came in, they started Hungarian and Ruthenian school continued. So the last 3 years I attended Hungarian, Ruthenian school. So it was a really mixture of everything. And that was till 1942. In 1942, I finished my 8th grade. There was nothing to do in the village, so I decided to go learn a trade, and I left home at age 14 and went to Budapest, the capital of Hungary, to learn a trade. Perhaps I should go back and talk about my family. My father's name was Herman, or Herschel. People in the village called him Herschel Cyprus because his mother's name was Cypra. So to distinguish him from the other Herschels, he was Herschel Cyprus. And my mother's name was Chaya, or Helen. My parents had, I was told, 10 children altogether. 3 died either in childbirth or very young. And all I could remember were 7 children. There was Zipporah, or Zipra, who was married and had 3 boys of her own. Her husband was taken early in the war to a labor camp to Poland, and he perished there. And then there was Miriam, who now lives in California, and Anshel, or Miklos. He was taken also early in the war to a labor camp in Hungary, and he got very sick, and he was refused medical aid, and he died as a result in this labor camp at the age 20 or 21. And then there was Shama, or Samuel. He still resides now in the Soviet Union. And I was next. And then I had 2 younger sisters, Hanna and Scheindl. Hanna and Scheindl. Scheindl was, I think, in Hungarian, Shari, and Hanna was Hojnal, or Hojnalka. When the Hungarians came in 1939, a lot of things changed. Many Jews were prevented from continuing in their jobs, and they were deprived of a livelihood, but life was still tolerable.
Well, let me ask you before we get into 39. Do you have any specific memories about being a child in your hometown?
Oh, yeah. As a child, I remember, first of all, getting up, starting Cheder, or Hebrew school, at a very young age. I think I was told I was 3 years old, although I can't imagine looking at a 3-year-old today that he could get up 5 o'clock every morning and go to a Hebrew school. But that's where they started at a real early age. I started public school at age 6, and we would go to Cheder from, say, 5 to 7, then go home, eat breakfast, go back to public school, go home in the afternoon, have lunch, and then go back to Cheder. And this was 6 days a week, I believe. We also helped out around the house. My father was involved in a number of projects to make a living. One of them was he was a contractor for the government. He built roads and bridges. We also owned some farmland around the house, not much. He would buy and sell milk. We would go early in the morning and to the peasants and buy the milk, and then we would ration it out and put it take it to the railroad station, send it to a town called Berekszás or Berehova, and then late in the afternoon go back to the railroad station to pick up the empty containers. And this was going on every day. And the children of all ages, including me, were recruited to help in this project. We didn't have, of course, the fun today's children have. Didn't have the toys or the televisions that are available today. Most of our games were improvising or played soccer. The little time we had. Saturday or Shabbat was something we all looked forward to, because we all dressed up that one day. We went to synagogue, and in the afternoon we could rest. It's the only day we really had a peaceful, restful day.
Did the family get along harmoniously? Was your father a dictatorial type? Was it a democracy? How was family life like?
Father was a very strong personality. He dominated the home. He also had a very bad temper.
Yeah?
Yeah. Mother was a very gentle soul. And she was mainly taking care of the children in the home. You can imagine having 10 children. Plus 7, as I said, is what I remember. Kept her busy. We would of course bake our own bread. Our mother would get up at 3 o'clock Friday morning to bake bread for not only for Shabbat but also for the whole week.
And this was baked on a wood-fired or a coal-fired stove?
We used wood. We had an oven, which was strictly used for baking bread, and it was fueled with wood. It was also used to cook cholent, because you could put it in on Friday and seal the oven, and it would bake for 24 hours, and then we came home to the synagogue, we would take out.
Sounds great.
It was delicious. As far as family life, it all depended, a lot depended on the conditions, economic conditions, and the children. Father had to work real hard to provide a living most of the time. At times it was easier, and other times it was harder. Father was a veteran of World War I. He was in the Austro-Hungarian army. He was a non-commissioned officer. In 1939, he was, what's the word, not drafted, I guess drafted, taken away into a Jewish labor camp in Hungary. And he was already in his 50s then. And he was there for a while, and then they let him come home. The younger people were sent to Poland or Russia, to labor camps there, and very few came back. Zipra, my older sister, got married, if I recall, at a young age, and she had 3 children, as I mentioned earlier. Miriam left home at age 16 or 17. She went to Belgium and worked there. When my father got sick in 1939, she came home. It was already, I recall, the Hungarians already had taken over that area. She had Czech passport. She had quite a bit of difficulty going back, but she did manage to go back to Belgium. Anshul was apprenticed at age 14 via Glacier. We had some relatives in the town of Bereksas, Berehov, who had a glass store, and they were selling all kinds of glass products, porcelain and dishes and stuff, but they also would do glazing on homes, windows, and he learned that trade over there. Sam, or Shama, who now lives in Soviet Union, left home at age 14 and went to Budapest to learn a trade. He was a tailor. He was a good tailor. As I mentioned earlier, I left home at 14 to learn the trade in Budapest, and I was learning the leather crafts business.
Was it usual for children of that town to leave home at such an early age? Or was this because of the economic conditions in the world at the time?
It was a combination of both, yes. It was a small village, so there was nothing to do for children. Under the Czechoslovakian government, some of the children would go to institutions of higher learning, which next there would be a high school, which we didn't have in the village. They would have to go to another town, or gymnasium, and then to university. But that was not very common. This was unusual. Some of the boys would go to yeshivas, or Hebrew schools, also in other towns. There was nothing to do in our village, really, so we had to do something, go someplace. And Jewish children at that time mostly went to bigger cities to learn trades. My father always thought I should learn to be a tailor, a carpenter, or shoemaker, because he thought that I would always be able to make a living from that, but none of these appealed to me.
But he didn't want anyone to follow in his footsteps as an engineer or a contractor?
Not that I recall, no. It was not an easy life, whatever he was doing. Everything was a struggle.
Would you consider yourself a poor family, or did that vary a lot?
Relatively speaking, I'd say we were better off than the average family in the community. Yes, I was not rich, but relatively well off.
Mm-hmm. Which gave you what privileges in the town? A better house, or?
We had what I consider a nice home, but a nice home in that town consisted of two big rooms and a all-purpose kitchen in between the two rooms. So it was like one room was used for everything. The dining room, kitchen,
study
living
hall.
room, study hall, and at night for sleeping. The other room was strictly for sleeping. And the room in between that I mentioned earlier was mostly like a summer kitchen, and the oven where mother baked bread or cooked for the Shabbat. So we could we'd have 4 or 5 people sleeping in each of the two rooms. Privileges, I don't know if you call it privilege. We had a maid, which was not unusual. Their labor was cheap. There was not much going on. There was no industry at all. Most of the area was agricultural. So we did have a maid at one time or other, not all the time. We had peasants help us with the land. It was a hard life. My father would get up real early and go get the milk at one time when he was not occupied with with the building of the highways or bridges. He always had something going to be able to make a living. At one time he was buying and selling hides, cow hides, anything to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing that he could really pass on to us.
Well, I don't know about that, actually.
As far as the trade.
Oh, as far as the trade. Well, one of the things that I've always noticed is that even when I was a kid in New York, my mom was always very active in social work, sending packages overseas, helping, and obviously yourself with the Israeli bond movement and all, and social work. Did your parents did you get this from your parents?
Absolutely. Yeah. If there's one thing we did learn is how to help others. to be charitable, to extend hospitality to people. This was a trademark of our home. We would have, there were many beggars passing through our village. I recall that, and almost every night we would have one or two spending the night in our home.
Strangers?
Total strangers, yeah. We would feed them and put them up for the night, and usually on the floor or in our stable. We had a place set up there, but we'd never turn anybody away. We happened to be living at the end of the village, so that people who would, strangers passing through the village, would ask other people to be put up for the night, and they were always sent to our home, and because people knew in town that we would never turn anybody away. And since we were also the last family in the village, we would not let the person go to the next town, which was another couple hours by foot. Most of the people were on foot at that time. So they say we never turn anybody away, whether for food or spending the night. We learned that in our home. This, I think, all our sisters and brothers continued in this tradition. And I hope our children will continue in that tradition. As I mentioned before, until 1939, everything was relatively peaceful. 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Czechoslovakia, the Hungarians took over our area. Changes took place right away, especially for the Jews. Many of the people were taken away to labor camps. Some of the Jews who could not prove that they were Hungarian citizens were deported to Poland. I remember one family, one woman was deported with her children, and she came back about a year later. Children were dead, and she was telling us horror stories, what was happening in Poland, and we just couldn't believe those terrible things, how people were being killed and burned alive in synagogues, and how she managed to survive. Now, this was early 1939. The worst was yet to come.
Who was, in 1939, who was still at home?
In 1939, I think only 4 children were at home. Sam, myself, and my 2 younger sisters. Anshel was learning a trade at that time. Miriam was in Belgium, and Sephora was married, and she lived in the same village at the other end of the village. Even under the Hungarians, things were relatively peaceful compared to what was going on in other countries occupied by the Nazis. We heard stories, what's happened, the Jews being deported from Slovakia and Czechoslovakia and Romania and Yugoslavia, all the surrounding countries and Western countries under Nazi occupation. But the worst that happened in Hungary was that the men were taken to labor camps. All this changed, of course, later on. In 1942, as I mentioned, when I was 14 years old, I left home, went to Budapest, and I was there until I was liberated. Now, in the meantime, the Nazis, the Germans, kept pressuring the Hungarians to expedite the final solution of the Jews of Hungary. And the Hungarians were very slow in doing this until 1944, when the Germans sent Adolf Eichmann to Hungary with the German troops to expedite the final solution. That's when our real trouble began, and I remember it vividly. I think it was March 15th when he came into Hungary. A month later, my family from home was deported to Auschwitz. The day the Germans arrived in Budapest, many of my friends, I was living in a Jewish home for apprentices. There were about 150 of us there, all boys ages 14 to 17 or 18. The Germans came into the building where where we lived, and it was built perfectly suited for them German troops. So they expelled us from that home. They took it over. The Nazis took it over for their own use. Many of my friends who came from the region where I was born in Carpathia picked themselves up and ran to the railroad stations to get trains to go home. I hesitated. I thought I'll wait a day or two to see what happens. I mean, I found out that most of these, or all of them, were arrested at the railroad station and deported to Auschwitz. And when I found it out, I decided to sit it out. This was in the middle of March of 1944. Things were happening very fast from then on, and all bad. In April of 1944, all the Jews from all over Hungary were deported first to ghettos in larger cities, and from there to Auschwitz. My family was taken away in April, a week after Passover. My dad has not been feeling well at that time, and he sort of predicted that he would not be taken by the Germans. And sure enough, the day the Germans arrived to pick up the Jews and deport them, he died in his home. So he's buried in Selce, the village where we were born. And as you know, last year I went back to visit his grave.
It is marked?
It is marked because Uncle Sam, my brother Sam, put up a tombstone after the war when he came home from Auschwitz. The rest of the family consisting of my mother, my older sister Tzipora, who had 3 children of her own, my brother Sam, and my 2 younger sisters, Han and Shaindl, were all taken to a ghetto in a town called Munkac and Mukachevo. They kept them there for several weeks, and in early May, I believe, they were all put in cattle cars and taken to Auschwitz. Of the entire family, only my brother Sam survived. I was in Auschwitz last year, and I could better understand what happened, and I found out, I saw the railroad ramp in Birkenau where the Jews would be arriving by trains from all over occupied Europe. How they were taken to the gas chambers and crematorium. In the beginning, they would keep them there for a while anyway, the Jews arriving there. But in 1944, when the Germans may or may not have realized that they were losing the war, they expedited the murder of the Jews. And when my family arrived in Auschwitz, I learned this both from my brother and also by being in Auschwitz last year. He was separated from the rest of the family, and after a few days was sent to another labor camp. From what we can establish now, my mother and my sister with her 3 children and my 2 younger sisters were taken after Mengele separated. You heard of Mengele, who supposedly died last year in Brazil, whose remains were found in Brazil last year. he would separate the able-bodied, the children and the older people, and then the stronger ones, like my brother Sam, would be sent to labor camps, and the others would be sent to the crematorium. From what I could understand, in May of 1944, this was only about 5 months before the end, the Russians liberated that area. The Germans' main task was just to kill the Jews, and there was no question about it. They were lined up. My family was taken from the train, and they were just waiting in line to be gassed. Simple as that. They, from what I gather, what I learned in Poland last year, that the most they could have been alive after they got out of the train was 5 hours. They were just waiting in line those 5 hours. Their turn to be taken to the gas chambers. They were told to undress because they'll be taking showers and deloused. When they undressed, they were packed into the gas chambers as tight as possible, and then the gas would be opened up and people would die. Then they had a commando of other young, strong Jews who would take the bodies and take them to the crematorium where they'd be burned. And there's no doubt in my mind anymore, well, it was hard for me to accept until last year, that this is what happened to my family.
During this time, you were in Budapest?
Yeah. As I said earlier, I was hesitating to go home because I had a feeling it would be a mistake to go home. So we were, as I mentioned, we were kicked out of the home where we lived in Budapest, and we were taken to another home, another area of town where there was another home for Jewish children, orphans. So we were there, and soon after that happened, we received all the Jews who had to live in certain areas, and the house had to have a yellow star on the gate or on the door, signifying the Jews lived there. All the Jews, young and old, had to wear yellow stars on our outer clothing, on our bread. And so it was very easy to pick us up and beat us up, and it was very common for the Hungarian Nazis to come into our building and take some of the kids away and never see them again, or beat us up and leave. The worst was yet to come. We also somehow, and I can't remember the details, I was only 15 years old, and it's been over 40 years ago. We received protective papers from the Spanish government, from the Vatican, the Swedish government, some of the neutral governments. You heard of Wallenheim from Sweden, who saved so many Jews. Because I did not know at the time about Wallenheim, but I knew that the Swedish government was issuing these either individual papers or for houses. And we would hang on our gate of the house these protective papers, hoping that this would keep the Nazis out. Now, what the paper said, this is extraterritorial area under the protection of either the Swedish government or the Vatican or the Spanish government. And then as individuals, we also had these, I think were called Schutzpass, or the protection papers. It did not, unfortunately, keep the Nazis out. They would ignore the papers or rip them up. For some reason, after the Jews were deported from all over Hungary, the Jews in Budapest were left. they were not deported. And I still, to that day, I'm not sure exactly why, but there was speculation that Eichmann wanted to trade us for trucks. There was a deal that he tried to make with the Jewish community. If the Jewish community could get from the Americans to the British, I don't know how many trucks that the Germans needed on their Eastern Front, then they would exchange so many Jews. In fact, there was a group of children who were permitted to leave, and they ended up in Switzerland, I think. I was one of those who was supposed to go on the next transport. I was told to get ready. I had photographs taken, and a group of children were supposed to have been sent to Switzerland. And I was supposed to be one of them, but it was cancelled, and I never knew at the time what was going on. But later on I found out this deal fell through, and so we stayed on. In the meantime, the Germans tried to make all kinds of deals. There were also rumors that the Germans wanted to keep the Jews of Budapest to prevent the Allies from bombing Budapest. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that that's naive, that would have kept the Allies away. We were bombed mercilessly 3 times a day. We would be bombed by, I think, the British in the morning. It was like clockwork, the Americans in the afternoon, and the Russians at night. I was in the position that time that I sort of welcomed the bombing until it got real close, and then I got real scared because we went into the cellars or bunkers or shelters. They were not really built to protect human lives. I was very lucky throughout because the bombing was very successful, and all the houses around me were bombed out, and the one I was living in stood out and it was safe for some reason.
Does that house still exist?
It probably does.
You haven't been back to Budapest since?
I was back twice to Budapest, but I have not been back in that particular area.
Specifically, the memories, or nothing you want to go back, or
No, the memories. No, I believe in going back. All my life since I left home, I wanted to go back to the village where I was born, and I finally succeeded last year. I talked to a lot of people, and they said they wouldn't go back for anything. I wanted to go back. I wanted to see the village. I wanted to see my father's grave. I wanted to see my brother who still lives there. And I'm very glad that it did go, even though it was very painful. I always wanted to go back to Budapest, but the 2 times that I did go, both times I only had a couple of days, and always with somebody else, and I never managed to see all the places where I lived. I saw some of the places, but not all of them, and I still hope to go back and look them up. And also people that I knew, I like to go back to see them. No, I can't forget, and I don't want to forget, and I don't think people should forget. Where was I? Forget.
Well, you're being bombed now, thrice daily.
Yes. For a while, they recruited us, young children, boys and girls at that time, 15 or 16 age, and we were clearing the rubble away each day from the bombing. It was hard work, but at least we were spared from worse things that were still to come.
At this point, did you know that your family had been deported?
Yes. I had a message first from the ghetto that they were all there. From Sam, my brother Sam, a message that they were there. And later I knew that they were deported. Of course, we didn't know where. I received a postcard from my brother, which was another German trick. He made him write postcards to say that they're at a resort place and all's well, and which was, of course, a German trick. Perhaps they also wanted to find out where some other Jews are left so they could place us down. We did not know specifically about Auschwitz, although we heard all kinds of reports that Jews are being murdered and gassed, and it was very difficult to believe. And even to this day, it's unbelievable. It's difficult to believe that things like that went on. So you can imagine, we just couldn't believe it. In the meantime, the Hungarians built a ghetto in Budapest, and they gathered all the Jews in Budapest. And
how do you build a ghetto? You wall off a section, or
they wall off a big section, and this happened to be in the old Jewish area. I think they took out all the non-Jews from there. They built big brick walls and gates where there's only one or two places you can come in and out. And they packed the Jews into that ghetto. One day they came to get us. I mentioned I was living on a children's home. There were children of all ages, from babies to teens. And the Hungarian Nazis came to gather up the children and take them to the ghetto. Our director ran to me and said, and I don't know why he picked me, he says, "Get in bed, pretend you're sick." And so I did, and the Nazi came to me and says, "Get ready to move." I said, "I'm sick." He said, "Okay, we'll come back for you later." So that's kind of saved me then. As I mentioned earlier, I was very lucky all along. It so happened that, and I still don't know how this happened, a few days later, somehow we managed to get into the ghetto and bring out the children back to this home, which was a happy event. A while later, they came back, the Nazis, and picked up all the boys who were able-bodied, and I was one of them, and they marched us to the front lines. Now the Russians were already advancing, and they were maybe 30-40 miles from Budapest at this time. They took us to the front lines, and there was a town called Gödöllő, I remember that, and we were made to dig trenches for the German army on the front lines. There were hundreds of us, including some older people brought from other places. We were living at that time on a farm, and every morning, early in the morning, they would take us to the front line. We would dig trenches. We could hear the shooting and the fighting. As the Russians were getting closer, they moved us back towards Budapest, and we were waiting in a building, and all of a sudden I see two of our friends, two young boys, who escaped from our group a few weeks earlier. How they found us, I never know. They had Hungarian army uniforms and Hungarian weapons, and they pretended they were Hungarian soldiers, and they took the people they knew, myself included, and marched us through the city back to that house where we were taken away from. So they kind of risked their lives to save ours. We went back to that house, and we were there for a while. In the meantime, the fighting was getting closer.
Well, let me ask you a question, because you're in the middle of a war situation. You're now, I assume, fairly unsupervised. You're hiding out in a home, etc. How did you feed yourself? How did you, provide? I mean,
feeding, it's difficult to remember, but there was very little that we ate. This working.
You're getting it.
There wasn't much food. We would take chances, and we were restricted by the Yellow Star. You could only go out certain hours, and we would take chances and go a different hour. We had ration cards, and we had a little money, so we would buy some food, but there wasn't much food available at that time anymore. We would just do the impossible, steal and scrounge and bag. And
meanwhile, the city's still being bombed on a regular basis?
Oh yes, and the fighting was getting closer. And Jews are being deported now from Budapest, also taken to Austria and to Germany. I know they were still taking them, I guess they were not taking them to Auschwitz anymore. Auschwitz may have been at this point already liberated by the Russians. Finally, in the meantime, sometimes in October, when the Russians were getting closer, the Hungarian regent, Admiral, his name was Admiral Horthy, he was an admiral in the, I don't know, Hungarians didn't have a navy, I know what.
Yeah.
Maybe in the before the war, may have been in the navy. He was the head of the state. They called him regent because it was supposed to have been a monarchy at one time. He petitioned the Russians for peace. This was something in October. He was ready to sign a peace agreement with the Russians. And of course, when we found out, we were very jubilant and we were very...
Didn't the Nazis object to that?
The Nazis objected very strongly, so much so that they arrested him and took him to Germany.
Oh.
And they installed a Hungarian puppet regime, and a Nazi by the name of Selce was head of the government. And that's where some of our more trouble began. They started to deport the Jews, beat the Jews, kill them in the streets. I was still in this home, and I remember one night a young boy came in who was taken to the field with his family, and they shot him all, the Nazis, in the field, and left him there for dead. He somehow was just grazed by a bullet through his head here, and woke up a few hours later with everybody dead. And he was brought, and he somehow found us and remained with us till the end. Things like this, people were, I had a cousin who had false papers, counterfeit papers, making him a non-Gentile, and he was arrested and shot. This was going on all the time. They would arrest people in the street and interrogate them and shoot them on the spot at that point. Or many of my friends were killed by Allied bombings too, because it was getting very intense. They said for a few days we had high hope that the Hungarians would sign an agreement with the Russians and we'd be liberated. This was not to be. As I said, Horthy was arrested and taken to Germany. A new Nazi puppet regime was installed, and the Jews were again, the remaining the few thousand Jews remaining in Budapest were being harassed again. I think it was at that point that maybe I jumped the gun when I was taken to the front lines. That's when it happened, to dig those trenches. And as I said, I was brought back a few days later, and by this time it's already December 24, Christmas Eve, I remember that, 1944. The Nazis came and told us to get ready. We had little children and teenagers, everybody had to leave, and they were not leaving anybody. And they started to march us, and we were carrying little babies in our hands as parents. Who knows what happened to them? We were being marched from, Budapest is two towns really, Buda and Pest, and divided by the Danube. We were in Pest, we were being marched across the bridges called the Danube to Buda, and that was on the way to Austria. and we were sure this is our end. When we arrived in Buda, and to the outskirts, we had a lot of commotion, a lot of shooting, because there's nothing unusual about that, because the shooting was very intense for quite a while. Some motorcycle Nazi drove up and told the guards to take us back, turn around and take us back to Pest. And we didn't know what was happening, but later we found out that at that point the Russians had completely encircled Budapest, and there was no way out. So that saved our lives at that point. Not all of us, unfortunately. Our group was told to be taken to the ghetto. There's a street called Sheep Utsa in the ghetto. And I think our guards misunderstood, and there was another street named Sivutsa, which sounded similar, and they took us there. When we got there, they didn't know what to do with us, but they were empty homes where the Jews were deported from, so they put us up there. We learned a few days later that a part of our group, another half, was taken to the Danube, lined up against the Danube, and shot and thrown into the Danube. This was not unusual. It was common to the Nazis to take people to the Danube, shoot them and throw them in the river. So again, my group was very lucky. We were there for several days. The fighting was getting closer all the time. The Russians were getting closer. And one day, we heard a lot of commotion in the courtyard, and as we looked out the window, we saw a machine gun was set up. We see Hungarian troops marching around, and they're yelling, "Everybody get ready, we're leaving." And again, we thought this was the end. We got ready, and they marched us several blocks to another home, and they set up a machine gun in the courtyard. And then we found out that these were our own boys, who again, some of the Jews infiltrated Hungarian home guard. There was so much confusion that the Hungarian troops were all in the front that the Hungarians established a national home guard, and the Jews infiltrated. They came and rescued us, and they said they would protect us until we were liberated, and they were ready to fight anybody coming in. And fortunately, there was no need to fight. A few weeks later, the Russians came in, and we were liberated. The Russian liberation was another story. We were quite disappointed in the Russians. Even though we were not afraid of our lives anymore, they would rob and rape, and without regard to who we were. So it was a big disappointment. There was nothing to eat. When we would dare go out in the street, I remember one time a friend of mine and I went out in the street. We saw a dead horse, and we just carved off a piece of meat and went back and made a goulash. And believe me, it tasted very, very good. People were starving. People were dead people were piled up all over in the streets. This is both from the fighting and from the killing. Especially where the ghetto was, people were piled up this high, bodies. At first it was difficult for me to look at a dead body. I would go like this, or like this, not to look at the bodies, but after a while you get used to it and you just climb over the body. There were so many of them. Thousands and thousands. After a while, we decided, a friend of mine and I, to head for home. And not knowing what to expect. There was no transportation whatsoever, so we went several days on foot, and finally there was some railroad. We connected some railroads, and after several days we made it home. This is a few hundred miles really, but it took us several days to get home. When I got home to my village, there was nobody there. There wasn't any Jews in the community at all.
Was your house there?
The house, the walls were standing. Everything else was taken, it was ransacked. I didn't know what to expect. At the railroad station when I arrived, I was met by a young kid who I knew from school, and he asked to see my papers, and I said, well, you know who I am? He said, no, this is another story, he wants to see my papers. So I knew that this was what to expect. I was there for a few weeks, staying with neighbors, and nobody returned. This was perhaps January or February 1985.
About 85.
1945, exactly 40 years ago, 1945. The fighting was still going on. The war ended in May or June, and this was January, February. We heard that some Jews that were returning from camps were heading for Bucharest, Romania, where they were given some money, some food and clothing. I think the money came from the United States from the joint. So my friend and I decided to go to Romania, to Bucharest. We went to Bucharest, and although we didn't find any relatives, we did find a couple of people from our village who were there. That time borders were open, and we were traveling back and forth through Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia to look for our relatives. In the village itself, I wasn't very welcome. People would tell me, neighbors would tell me that so-and-so has our furniture or our sewing machine, and I would go and ask if I can get it back, and I would be told that no, they would rather, one woman particularly told me they'd rather chop up the furniture for firewood than give it back to me. People started rumors. I came back from one of my trips, and my neighbors told me the militia was looking for you, and I said, why? Because somebody saw you poison a well, water well. This is the kind of rumors people started spreading about Jews coming back from implementation camps or survivors. Finally, in June, after the war was over, Sam, my brother Sam, returned to the village. He was the only survivor out of the group that my family was taken to Auschwitz. He came back like a skeleton, very thin, even though he had several weeks in camps that the United States Army established, and they were feeding them, so I can imagine how he looked at the day he was liberated. And he told me what happened to the rest of the family. Earlier I found out that my sister Miriam, who was in Belgium, went to Belgium when the war broke out, and later was in France, and I found out that she was in the United States and established contact with her. And that's what remained of our family, the three members. Sam, Miriam, and myself. So
you and Sam were back at the old town, at your hometown?
Old town, and we tried to re-establish our lives there.
Mm-hmm.
Sam met a girl from the next village, and he was married toward the end of 1985.
45.
1945. I could see that there was no future for me there. We were still hoping that particular area, Carpathia, would be returned to Czechoslovakia rather than to the Soviet Union. We couldn't believe that the Soviet Union, being an ally of Czechoslovakia in the war, would actually take away territory from which rightfully belonged to Czechoslovakia. That's exactly what happened in 1985. I keep saying 1985. In January of 1946, now we're in 1946, all of a sudden we learned that Carpathia will be incorporated into the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, part of the Soviet Union. The borders were closed and there was no way out. And there I was trapped. And I could see that this was not for me. There's no future for me in the Soviet Union. So there were 5 of us, 5 friends, decided to we planned an escape. This was already February 1945. 46. 1946. Keep saying 1986. 1946. And several other people managed to smuggle themselves across into Czechoslovakia, and from there either to Germany, and from there to either Israel or Palestine or the United States. So we decided, 5 of us, that we're going to try to get across the border into Czechoslovakia. This was after the Russians closed the borders. 5 of us went to a town called Uzhgorod, or also known in Hungarian as Ungvar, which was very close to the Czechoslovakian border, especially particularly to Slovakia. We made contact with 2 smugglers. 2 smugglers owned farms on the border. Their farms were right on the border between the Soviet Union at that point and Slovakia, Czechoslovakia. They were, of course, familiar with the area, and they promised to smuggle us across into Czechoslovakia. They put us on 2 horse-drawn wagons. 3 of our friends in the first one, and 2 of us in the second one, so we wouldn't arouse suspicion. And it was snowing like crazy. And apparently the first wagon with our 3 friends had no problem getting through, but our wagon, the horses had an awful hard time getting through the snow with the wagon. And this, I thought, doomed us, that we'll never make it, I thought to myself. But exactly the opposite happened. The first.
How old were you then?
1946. I was 18 years old at the time, or 17. Exactly the opposite happened. What happened is the first wagon made it to the border, or to the farmer's house. And as he was taking the 3 of my friends across the border, they were caught by the Russian border guards. When we got there late because of this trouble we had with the horses pulling there was our luck, because while the Russian guards were taking away these 3 friends of ours, we managed to get across the border into Slovakia.
You and another fellow?
I and another fellow who is now in Israel.
Ah, that's what I wanted to know.
The first group was caught and was jailed for quite a while. They were later released. I think one of the 3 is now in Israel, I think one in the United States, and one is still there. My friend and I were kept overnight in Slovakia after they were taken smuggled across the border. They had some relatives on the other side of the border. They kept us till the morning, and on foot we marched deeper into Czechoslovakia until the next town, where we would be able to get help from the Jewish community and advise what to do.
You knew this beforehand? There was a network set up then?
Yes. How much, whether we knew in advance, I'm not sure. Whether we just went by instinct and knowing where the next bigger town is, and knowing that we help each other. The cliche says, you take care of your own. We went to a town called, I think, Michalovce, and sure enough there were some Jews there, and they fed us and they helped us, and we got on a train towards Prague. It was very common in those days that the police would come on the train or anyway stop you and ask for ID cards.
Right. And
they asked for our ID card. And fortunately, when I was in Bucharest in perhaps a year earlier, I registered with the Czechoslovakian consulate in Bucharest, and they gave me Czech documents, which I had on me, and I showed it to him, and he was very suspicious. And he asked where I'm from, where I'm coming. So I have one of the two policemen served in our area before the war. He remembered that. He started talking to me. He said, "What are you going to do when you get to Prague?" And I said, "Well, we're going to the Interior Ministry to report," which I had no intention of doing. But I didn't know I was so smart in those days that I thought of that. And he said, "Oh, if you do that, then we'll let you go." So we were put back on the train. We went to Prague. We were in Prague for a few days, and then we went to a town in the Sudeten part of Czechoslovakia, where I knew there were homes and jobs, and we had some friends who earlier made the same journey. So we went there in a town called Chomutov. We got homes that the Germans vacated. Germans were all deported from that area into Germany by the Czechs. And we got jobs, and we worked there for a few months until June of 19, let me get the year straight, 46. We had an opportunity to join a group of orphan children, 100 orphan children who were taken to London, England. And at that time, I was 18 years old, and I think the deadline was 17 or perhaps 16, 17, I think. So I made myself a year younger. So I was a year younger. So I could join this group. I was in England for almost 4 years.
Who sponsored this?
This is the Jewish community of England. There was a committee. I think it was called CCCC, Committee for the Children Concentration Camps. And they sponsored us. There's a fire station across here.
Oh.
So when we arrived in England, first we stopped in France for 2 weeks, which is a beautiful time for us. First time out of Eastern Europe, going through by train from Prague through Germany into Belgium. In Belgium we were detained for a day or two by the Jewish community there, and then we were taken to France, Paris. We spent 2 weeks there.
Oh, really?
We were entertained and we toured for 2 weeks there, and then finally by boat. We were sick like dogs on the boat to England.
Is this your first boat ride?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, ferry. This is that type of a boat. Yeah. In England, we all lived in one big home for a while. It was called the Jews Temporary Shelter.
Is this in London?
It was in London, Mansell Street. Originally, this home was built for people who were transients coming from Russia or Poland and going on the way to America or even to England, and until they could provide a passage to America or get jobs in England, they would live in this temporary home. So when we arrived, we used that home. We were giving English lessons. We were fed there and housed, and until we were able to get jobs. And then we were living with families. I got a job. I was continuing working in the area what I learned in Budapest as a child, leather craftsmanship, and I kept going to night school to study. I received a diploma from the Royal Society for the Royal Society for the Arts, or my English for foreigners or something like that. And finally, in we get the year straight, December of 1949, I arrived in New York.
Well, how'd you make
Queen Mary.
on the Queen Mary?
Queen Mary. This was
Queen Mary in Long Beach?
Yeah, that's St. Queen Mary. Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful. It was only 5 days, and I hated to get off. It was so beautiful.
Well, you're bridging an awfully big gap from London to the States. I mean, you had been in touch with.
Meantime, your mother, my sister Miriam, I was in touch with her. She sent me documents to what they call affidavit at that time to come to the United States. Now, many of our friends who did not have relatives in the United States, who came in a DP quota and didn't have to wait as long as I did, because I had a relative, I had to wait almost 4 years to come to the States. But I didn't mind it. I liked London. I was learning English, and I was working. I saved up enough money to pay my own passage.
Oh, really?
Come here, yeah. And so I didn't really mind there. Many of our friends went to, at that time, Palestine.
Is there a reason why you did not?
Mainly because I wanted to join my sister here. Although I was a Zionist then and a Zionist now, but I wanted to join the family. So I didn't leave much out of England. I was working and studying there. I liked it.
You're living with the family?
Living with a family, yes.
Are you in touch with them, or they?
I was for many years, and gradually lost, you lose touch. I still have friends in England, whom I saw when I was in England.
Is this where you met that Frank fellow with the typewriter business?
Yeah.
That I had met?
Yeah. You met him?
When I was 11.
Oh. Yes, Frank was my roommate.
Oh.
And when we lived with the family, usually they tried to keep 2 or 3 kids together. So he was my roommate. We shared a room for many years. He was, when I left him, a typewriter repairman.
Right.
When I went back 20 years later, he was a typewriter tycoon. He owned several stores in London, of business machine stores. Typewriters and adding machines, and I would imagine by now he's into computers, so it has been for many years. When I was there, it was about the time where they were planning to change over to the metric system. So he was getting ready to have all the new equipment ready for the big changeovers, you know, to have all this equipment. What happened to him, I don't know. I have to go back and find out. Of the 100 kids that lived together in London, some in Israel, some in the United States, and a few remained in England. I'm in touch with some of them. I was in Tel Aviv only 2 weeks ago, and one morning, Sylvia and I were walking, and we ran into one of these friends who lives in New Jersey, but I ran into him in Tel Aviv.
Just on the street?
Yeah, right in front of the Hilton. He was making his morning walk, and we were in the opposite direction.
How long had it been since you've seen the man?
It so happened he was in Indianapolis a few months earlier, but he didn't know at that time he was going to be in Israel. And he said it was a last-minute decision, and it was the last thing we expected to see each other. When I go to London, to New York, I look up, or I'm in touch with several of those friends. And in London, we have an organization, both in London and New York. We have a reunion every year in New York Unfortunately, I haven't been able to make any of them because that's my busy season. I can't get away, but I get reports from there. So I am in touch with some of these people. Some of them did very well for themselves. Another one you know is Gabby Collar, the dentist in California, Los Angeles. No? We have I have a friend, a judge in Los Angeles, who was with us in London. We have dentists, doctors, lawyers, jewelers, and even directors of state of Israel bond offices, myself. When I arrived in the States, I lived in New York with Miriam, my sister Miriam, your mother, for a while.
This was, what year was this again?
This was 1946. No, 19. Well, I arrived in 15th of December 1949, so this was 1950 already. In 1950, I went to a night school, George Washington High School, from which you graduated. I was drafted into the United States Army, even though I was not a citizen. I was told I didn't have to serve, but there's a possibility they'll send me back to Europe. So I managed to get a deferment because of my schooling till June of 1951. This was during the Korean War, and I was then drafted.
Gee, my mother was 6 months pregnant.
Right. I went in June, and you were born in September, and they wouldn't let me come home for your bris, but I think I did come to see them. I don't know if it was in the hospital or home later, but for the bris I couldn't get a leave. And then in February of 1952 I was sent to Korea, and I was there for 15 months. At this point I decided that two things. One, I didn't want to go back to my old trade, because it was not a good trade for the United States.
Leather work.
Leather work is all mass-produced, and at that time they were switching over to plastics. The employment situation is very bad. You'd work in season for 6 weeks, and then you'd sit in the union and wait to be sent for another job, and I thought this was not for me. After I came back from Korea, I lived in New York for another year. I finished my high school, and I decided I wanted to go to college, and I chose Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, because they had a very good printing management program, and you could get a bachelor's degree, bachelor of science degree in that. So I thought I'll combine a
What interested you in the printing field?
It always appealed to me. I also had some friends who were in it, and to me it was a glamorous profession. I also like to write, and I felt that there was as close to writing as possible. I like journalism. Some journalism courses I added to the RIT student paper. So this was close to what I like to do. After 3 full years in Rochester, including summers, I got my bachelor's degree, and I lost my bachelorhood. I married Sylvia, I met her in Rochester. I got a job in Cleveland, Ohio, with the World Publishing Company. I was there 15 years.
Well, when did that job start?
1957.
Oh.
1957. In the meantime, we had 3 wonderful boys. Mark was born in Rochester while I was still a student. David and Daniel were born in Cleveland. And in 19...
Oh, wait. How'd you meet Aunt Sylvia?
Oh. Is that important?
Yeah.
It so happened that Sylvia worked, strangely enough, in the printing school at RIT, but I never met her there. I don't know how that could have happened. But after she left, I met her at a synagogue picnic. The Bethel Synagogue of Rochester had a singles picnic. And a friend of mine and I said, well, what the heck, let's go. We were single. So that's where I met Zoe, at a picnic. Love at first sight.
Did you get married right away? Did you date for a while?
We got married at the end of the summer. This was in the summer, in the spring, and we got married at the end of the summer. And I still had a year of college. And she was working at that time for the U.S. Navy. Civilian employee. And so she helped me get through college. Because I was a veteran, so I was getting veteran subsistence.
Oh.
I was working part-time in Rochester, and I was editing the paper. I was getting something for that too. So we managed. Mark was born while I was, as I said, finishing up college. And then Cleveland. We liked Cleveland, had a good job there with the Gold Publishing Company. In 1971, the company was sold. Actually, a year or two ago, it was sold to Times Mirror of Los Angeles. They couldn't manage it. They proceeded to ruin it, so they sold it to American Can Company.
Where?
American Can owned a printing place here in Indianapolis. American Can had no intention of keeping the plant going in Cleveland, so they closed it down. 700 people were out of work. They shipped most of the equipment to Indianapolis.
Wow.
And they asked 30 or 40 of the employees to come to Indianapolis with the equipment. I was one of those 40. I was with the company for 2 years. I was not happy with my position here, and I was offered a job.
It was a different position? Wasn't it? You were an estimator, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in the same position, but working conditions were not to my liking here. I was very unhappy. I met some friends who were active in the community, and I was active in the Jewish community as a volunteer, so I was asked to join the Israel Bond organization. After some hesitation and after some prodding, I accepted the position. First as associate director, and then when my boss retired some 6 or 7 years ago, I became the director of the office here. The office is in charge of the state of Indiana and half of Illinois and a couple of areas in Wisconsin and Iowa. We sell between $3 and $5 million worth of bonds every year from our office. Our children have grown. As you know, Mark made Aliyah. Mark graduated from Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia University. He married Julie, made Aliyah to Israel. They have 3 wonderful children. We have 3 sons. I keep telling people we have 3 sons and 3 grandsons. Mark has 3 beautiful sons. David just finished his graduate work. He got his PhD in chemistry. And about a month ago, he started his new position as senior chemist at Mobile Chemical Company in Princeton, New Jersey. He married a beautiful girl also, Susan, Lucina of Sudbury, and they're making a home in Yardley, Pennsylvania. We look forward to another grandchild coming from David and Susan early next year. Daniel, who happens to be in Israel right now as an intern for the Jewish Federation at our sister city of Beit Shemesh, will be home in a couple of weeks. He is going to be a senior at the business school of Washington University, St. Louis Business School. He's doing very well. He's a good student, and he's thinking of going to graduate school. So he works as a hard-working person. He made a perfect partner for me. She made my life very happy and easy. She's a hard worker. She is the administrator for the Hebrew Academy of Indianapolis, where we have 200 students. I also happen to be vice president of the academy.
You do?
Yeah. And the chairman of the scholarship committee, so I'm also deeply involved. We talk about our day school, our academy. It's like it's a part of our lives. And our lives revolve around the community, our people, and our family.
What do you see for the future? What do you look forward to?
Future, we look forward to our children being happily married and settled. We're looking for a happy retirement after we feel we've done everything we can for our jobs and for our people. And possibly making Aliyah to Israel, or if not, spending maybe 6 months out of the year there. We love Israel, and I feel that two of the biggest things that happened to me in my lifetime, the worst of course was the Holocaust, and the best was the establishment of the State of Israel.
Why is that?
Well,
I know
why
why first.
Well, the Holocaust is the worst thing that happened. For a number of reasons. One, I need not tell you, our people have been wandering for the last 2,000 years, and being kicked out from one country and another. I just came back from Spain, where I visited town Toledo, where at one time we had 12,000 Jews, some 500 years ago before the expulsion. In 1492 we had 12,000 Jews, and now there's one Jew living there. And we happen to have met him there. We know that while the slaughter in Europe was going on, very few nations lifted a finger to help us. We know now that even the United States, which we love, could have done a lot and did not do anything. I know that President Roosevelt, who was revered by the Jewish people, and I thought of him as a saint, we now know that he knew what was going on and refused to help. When the Jewish leaders of America found out what was going on and wanted to see him, he refused to see them. When they asked, the Jewish leader asked the United States government, the British government, to at least bomb the railroads leading toward Auschwitz, carrying our people there on a daily basis. The government, both governments refused. They said it was not in the war effort, they couldn't reach Auschwitz with our planes. We know now that this is not true. We have evidence that was found in the archives in Washington that the United States knew exactly the pictures of the Auschwitz and Birkenau concentration camps. United States Air Force planes bombed factories 5 kilometers from Auschwitz, so that the planes could reach it, and they could have bombed. And even though some of our people might have been killed, it might have delayed the killing of our people. European countries, many of them collaborated with the Nazis, including the French and some others. They helped the Nazi effort to get rid of the Jews. The Jews had no place to go. You know that a shipload of people came to the United States before the war, and the United States refused to let any of them come in. They were taken back to Germany, and all of them ended up in concentration camps. Most of them died. This was the St. Louis. The name of the ship was St. Louis.
What?
St. Louis was the name of the ship. I think a film was made about it a few years ago.
Voyage of the Damned or something?
I think so, yeah. I think the United States learned a lot since then. I mean, look what happened when the Hungarian Revolution in '56. I don't know, some 100,000 Hungarians were let in. Cubans came in, including criminals and insane people. They were coming by the hundreds of thousands. We let them in. Cambodians, Vietnamese, Czechs. I mean, any people came in, but the gates were closed for the Jews. There was a new book came out recently, written by a non-Jewish professor, detailing how much the United States government knew and how people in the War Department did everything possible to make sure that no Jew would be allowed to come into this country. They were actually not only not helping, they were actually preventing people from coming in. That's one of the reasons why I think the establishment of the State of Israel is so important. I was very naive as a child. I used to think that once the World War II is over, there'd be no more evil, there'd be no more anti-Semitism, and everything would be just fine. Now, we know that this didn't last long, and anti-Semitism still exists. Even in the Soviet Union, Stalin supposedly was ready to deport Jews. He was toward the last years of his life, and only because he died, saved many Jews from being deported, because he accused them of all sorts of crimes, including the doctor's blood. And this was a plot that Stalin said there was a group of Jewish and Ukrainian doctors who plotted to kill him and all the many other Russian leaders. Well, after he died, it came out it was all a fabrication. But many of them were arrested. Jewish poets, writers, right after the war were arrested by the Russians and executed. This was right after the war. There are people now who claim the Holocaust never existed.
What is your reaction to someone like that, or a situation like that? I mean, it's
well, I'm not. I can't say well that. Well, who cares? I can't say that. I think it's tragic because we know what happened, because I know my own family if it didn't happen. The survivors, like myself, are what I call an endangered species. I mean, how much longer will we be around? The eyewitnesses are not going to be around forever. And if this stuff is persisted upon, that there was no, this is an invention, a Zionist plot, then I think it can happen again. I used to think it couldn't happen again, but I'm not convinced anymore. I think it happened on a smaller scale in other countries. I don't like it when people compare discrimination in other countries with the Holocaust. I think the Holocaust was a unique event that was specifically designed to murder Jews. For no other reason than they were Jews. I don't think anything like this existed in the world's history. And the Germans were willing to give priority over their war effort to kill Jews. I mean, they would divert trains and trucks to the killing of the Jews from their war effort. That's how obsessed they were with the killing of the Jews. And they built camps for no other reason, like Birkenau was specifically built to murder Jews for no other reason. If we know that Israel is ready to accept Jews from wherever they're persecuted, I just came back from there and I saw some of the falashas, Jews from Ethiopia, the black Jews, who were being absorbed in the communities there. Israel is willing to receive Jews from wherever they come, for whatever reason. And as I said earlier, people are comparing what happened in Beirut a few years ago with the Holocaust. People are comparing the apartheid in South Africa with the Holocaust. I am against this comparison, because as I mentioned before, that event has no parallel in the history of the world.
So consequently, the establishment of the State of Israel provides what?
It provides a haven for the Jewish people. Should they be persecuted? But that's not the only reason why I feel so good about being the establishment of the Jewish people. The Jews deserve a home of their own, and they have it, and I hope the world decides finally to leave them alone to build a homeland. As you know, I was there 5 times, and each time I'm more impressed. And if there were peace in the world and peace in that region, Israel would be Switzerland of the Middle East, which is becoming in spite of what's happening in the Middle East.
What about the movements in Israel? Rabbi Kahani. How does that fit in after our experiences?
Unfortunately, this is as a result of a democratic system, where Israel is very democratic, maybe more democratic than it should be under the circumstances. And anybody who can get enough votes can get elected to the parliament.
But apparently he's getting the votes.
He's getting the votes.
From what I've read, a fairly racist.
He is a racist. I talked to many Israelis, and they're upset about it. They even introduced legislation in the Knesset, the parliament, to prohibit the kind of racism that he preaches, which is a difficult thing to do in a democracy where free speech exists. There are all kinds of fringes, unfortunately, in Israel, from the left to the right. There's a Communist Party, a very small fringe. The leftist parties, the rightist parties, but that's the price you pay for democracy. The Israelis take their politics very seriously, but they're not happy with the type of policies advocated by Kahana and some of the other fringe elements.
Well, I remember an interview with Vidal Sassoon, who was very pro-Israel, and his experiences, I believe, in England in World War II. And he is a very strong supporter of Israel, he says, because Israel represents, for Jews in the United States and anywhere in the world, that as a country, it translates to an individual experience in that as a Jew, we can no longer be pushed around as a nation or as individuals, and that it's given, even in my lifetime, being beaten up coming out of Hebrew school in Manhattan and such, with the establishment of the State of Israel, being able to defend itself successfully, has given the image of the Jew a whole new dimension.
I firmly believe that. I think, especially after 1967, the Six-Day War, I think the Jews of the world gained a lot more respect. The Jews of the Soviet Union, which until 1967 were in the background and you didn't hear a peep out of them, all of a sudden 1967 they became proud Jews and came out of the closet, so to speak. The movement that led to immigration and to the movement that exists in Russia today, I think, was as a result, to a large extent, the result of the 1967 war. And if you remember, I remember the 67 war, we were all proud, we were 10 feet tall. We had some setbacks, but I think Jewish people as a whole, even those who do not live in Israel, are prouder because of the existence of the State of Israel. maybe I should mention my name. My name, Michael
Who are
Blain.
you anyway?
We were born as Blobstein, B-L-O-B-S-T-E-I-N. I could trace it back to 2 or 3 generations, but then we don't know where the name came from. We always assume that any Blobstein in the world is related. All the Blobsteins I knew back home, and one in London, one in Australia, and New York, we're all related. The way it's spelled, you don't run into this name too much. I was in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem a couple of weeks ago, and I looked up the name Blobstein, and I found 27 listed. This is a list of people who died during World War II. Our family was not listed. I registered when I was there. There were some from Poland and Russia there, which spelled the same way as ours, of whom I never knew. So apparently there were some other branches of the Blobsteins. I don't know what the word means. Stein means stone, but blob, I don't know what it means. And that the word blob is one of the reasons so we wanted to change our name.
I was going to ask about it.
So we shortened. We took the first 2 letters and the last 2 letters and made it Blain. Now Mark, as you know, decided he wanted to go back to his roots, and he changed it back to Blobstein. So we have still a Blobstein carrying on the Blobstein name.
But you're not thinking of changing it back?
No, but I was sort of proud of Mark for doing it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I had some bad experience when I was being interviewed for a job after graduating college, when I was told by one of the interviewers if I want to stay in the business, I better change my name, which upset me tremendously. But after that, I developed a complex. I never had to spell my name. But I still have to spell my name. I thought I'll simplify it by changing it to a simple name like Blain. And people always want to give me an E at the end, so... Did I leave anybody out or anything out?
Boy, it's hard for me to say if you left anything out. I remember in terms of, obviously my experience with you goes back to when you were living in Cleveland with the 3 boys in University Heights on Scarsboro, and spending the summers there, which was always like the highlight of my year. And in fact, I was going to move to Ohio instead of California, if not for Linda interceding on that. But apparently there was a time when I had blood poisoning in New York when I was a kid. Apparently a child, and cousin Ari,
Yeah.
you know, I guess the dentist or whatever. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. And yourself gave me some transfusions.
Really?
Yeah. Really? I'm glad it's a highlight of your life.
Yeah. I remember something vaguely.
Yeah.
I was talking to Sylvia last night about something that happened 10 years ago, and she says, I'm amazed that you remember that, because certain things are completely out of my mind. I can't remember things, and I'm always amazed when people remind me of things that I said 20, 30 years ago. I have some friends who remember word for word what I said and remind me of it, and my memory is not that good, but certain things I remember, certain things I don't know whether it's old age or what.
What was that came up last night?
I can't remember that either.
Well, I remember something, an incident, I think I've mentioned to you since, but you were in California, we were driving along, we're showing you the sights, and I was very pleased with our left turn lanes that we had. And I said, every street has left turn lanes, and you looked at me and said, not every street. And since then I've become very, very particular about not exaggerating, you know, specifically because of your reaction to my exaggerating, you know, not to exaggerate.
And I don't know why, I'm always very conscious of people when they say, and Sylvia is very guilty of this, when she can say that we were in Spain last week, she says, every restaurant is an open-air restaurant. So happened we had 2 dinners and both open-air restaurants, but they're not all open-air restaurants. So I usually hope good-naturedly correct her. Not everybody does this, or not all, and and she has this tendency to exaggerate everybody. It always happens, and I said,
Gee. I think that's hormonal.
I hope that it's a positive
oh yes,
reaction that you had to this.
Oh, yeah. It got me to think.
We're all guilty of that. I generalize sometimes too. You asked about our home experience earlier in the taping. As you probably know, my family, the remaining family, is very close. With your Uncle Sam, my brother Sam in Russia, and your mother, my sister Miriam. We are very close. We are in touch constantly. We help each other, especially my brother in Russia. We visited him twice. He wrote recently a very touching letter that he is so happy that he has such good brother and sister who come visit him, because there are others who he knows, and I know, and you know, that are not that close.
Mm-hmm.
So we do feel very strong about a family.
Is there a reason why Sam hasn't been brought out from Russia?
Oh, I should have mentioned that when I left Russia and I was smuggled myself across, I was supposed to either go back or send back for Uncle Sam, for my brother. My experience with my friends being caught and my own experience of getting across was so bad that he being already married for two people, I didn't want to take a chance, and he just got stuck there. And as you know, for many years nobody left Russia, and a few years ago when the Soviet government started to let people leave Russia, one of his sons, your cousin, my nephew Herman, who's now in Israel, left with his wife, who we saw a couple of weeks ago. And Sam and his family kept postponing, we'll wait, we'll see, now the kids are finishing college, now there's always some excuse, until finally the Russians stopped letting people out. But they still want to leave, and hopefully...
they do want to leave?
Yes,
oh.
They want to go to Israel, and hopefully one day we'll see him there.
Well, that'd be very nice.
Yes.
But there's nothing that can be done on this end to expedite that.
No, all we can do is send them paper, or maybe use our influence with some of our friends in the Senate. If our Senator Lugar goes to Moscow for some reason, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, we have good relation with him, he could put in a good word in Moscow, perhaps, with the people in the Kremlin. Or Ted Kennedy, when he goes, he was there last year, he managed to arrange for a few people to leave Russia. Must mention Indianapolis, we love it here. We have a lot of friends, and this is our friend Mike, Mike Silver, and we have many good friends here. Back to our family, my sister Miriam has two children, you Josh and Linda, or Liana. And my brother Sam has had 5 sons. One died at an early young age, and 4...
How early?
He was, I think, 14 or 15.
Oh, bad. Oh, really? From what?
Rheumatic fever or something.
Oh, really?
Which they were not equipped to handle there.
So he has 4 surviving?
4 sons, yeah. One is in Israel, as you know.
Herman, yeah.
And 3 are still there. One of them is married, 2 of them are single.
What do they do?
Anshul is a telephone installer. They call him engineer. Everybody's an engineer, a telephone engineer. Jacob is a German language teacher. And Shneil, or Sasha, is what they call there an economics engineer. I don't think there's any equivalency to that, anything to that here. It's a combination of accountant and systems, statistics. He works in a plant, I think it's what we call here a statistician. Like that.
What does Sam do?
And Uncle Sam is semi-retired. He had a good job. He was director of a grocery store over there, the supermarket. It's a good position there. At least you have food. And,
That helps.
He was very much liked in the community. He helped a lot of people. People who come out now, who have come out from there, tell me even from far away, from Selce, they say he's well known. He helped a lot of people during the bad times with food, or when they were ready to leave with money. And people can't understand that somebody like him who helped everybody else to leave remained behind.
Yeah. And he's been married to the same woman since the war ended then. Is that true?
Yes, Esther.
Esther?